Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'm afraid I don't speak Thai, and I realise there's some non-native English speakers in the audience, so I'll try and go slowly. If I go too fast, then please don't be shy about asking if I could repeat or go over a point or anything like that, because I know if I was sitting through a lecture in Thai, I'd be completely lost, and you're much better at English than I am. So if you haven't met me before, my name's Tim Jeffries. My title here is the Second Master. I'm essentially one of the deputy heads in the school. I've called this talk rather pretentiously, "What if everything you thought you knew about education was wrong?" which appears to sort of hold me up as some kind of guru who knows the truth. But in actual fact, none of these ideas are original or my own. There is nothing new under the sun. These two books, if you're interested about some of the things that I raise, contain most of the arguments that I'm going to make. I happen to think that the arguments are true, otherwise there would be no point in me making this. But some of them are controversial. I was showing this talk to the headmaster this morning, and he was wincing at some of the things that I'm going to say. So they are controversial, some of the things in the educational community. But I happen to think that they are true, so that's where they're from. So I hope that I'm not going to be setting up straw men here, things that you don't believe anyway, and then I roundly demolish them and say, "Woohoo, look at me, isn't that clever?" I hope that some of the things will be things that you think are at least partially true, and I'm able to demonstrate that you maybe need to go away and think about that, because I think there are problems with holding that particular worldview. But doing this is really, really hard, really hard. I believe things about the world, you believe things about the world that you have done, in my case for 43 years, in your case for 21 years. It's hard to change your mind, yeah? It's hard to change your mind. And what we tend to do is we look at the world, we have our own worldview, we have our own beliefs, and we'll discount anything that appears to contradict those beliefs and cling on to things that appear to bolster those beliefs in what is known as confirmation bias. So we go around constantly affirming our pre-held beliefs, crowding out things that appear to contradict them, and sometimes surrounding ourselves with people who also hold those beliefs. And it's particularly true of teachers. If you believe something about education, you're going to find it annoying that someone disagrees with you, and you're probably not going to hang out with them in the staff room, and you may not eat with them at lunch. In some cases, it is that serious. Social media is terrible for this, okay? Because you surround yourself with people who are like you, and you validate the things that they say by liking them or hearting them, and then you get more of the same. And so your worldviews are just bolstered and bolstered and bolstered. And all I'm asking you to do really is to consider that some of the things you believe, and I need to do this myself constantly, might not be true. They might be wrong. I might have surrounded myself by people who are validating me, and there might actually be a truth out there. And if I can really pluck up the courage, I can move myself from this position to this position, which is where the truth is, the objective truth is. And I do believe in objective truths. I think there are truths out there. I think if you say that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, well done, but it objectively does, okay? And I think that about a lot of things in the universe. There are things that are just simply true, yeah? People who say it all has to do with opinions and how they feel and so on, don't jump out of windows on the second floor, because they know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, it will happen. It will end in an accident. So we've got to be aware of these things. You might think this is all a bit theoretical and nonsense, but people have done research into this. I'm going to use a male example. I'm sure there are female examples, but a male example. So in an experiment done by some psychologists, some males were introduced to beautiful actresses. And the beautiful actress appeared to befriend them and talk to them and so on. And then the meeting was stopped. And the beautiful actress was asked to write a report on what they thought of the male. And then the male would look at the report, and some of the reports were, I couldn't stand the guy, and some of the reports were, oh, he was really nice. And then the males were told, the beautiful woman was told to write that, okay? Was told to write that. And if the beautiful woman had been told to write something positive about them, they still believed that was actually what she thought. And if the beautiful woman had been told to write something negative about them, they said, oh yes, that explains it. So these men, and I am a man, these men honestly believed that that woman liked them, regardless of the evidence, in spite of the evidence. If they'd been told that she'd been asked to write something negative, they simply used that to bolster their belief that she clearly liked them. Yep. So it's very, very interesting. I put there an image of Jesus stroking a dinosaur. I hope there's no one who believes that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. But there are people out there on the internet who earnestly believe these things. And no matter how much you reason with them, you cannot get them to move their position. I have been in a church before where the pastor said, unironically, that fossils had been put there by the devil to deceive us. Yeah? So no amount of evidence was going to make this man change his mind. The Bible held the literal truth in every respect, including the age of the earth. Yeah? It didn't matter what you presented to him, he would just fall back on some ever more ridiculous explanation for how things came about. So that's a rather lengthy explanation or appeal, really, to your better selves. If you disagree with some of the stuff that I'm going to say, then go and have a look at it. It may well be that you come to the conclusion that I'm wrong. But allow for the possibility that I'm right. And go and do a bit of research. Yeah? So, the first myth is this, that teaching children facts is the lowest form of education. That somehow that is not a good thing to do. That children should be having fun in lessons and experiencing things and finding stuff out for themselves. And the old style of a teacher standing at the front and communicating facts to them is wrong. There are variations on this theme, all of which you'll hear occasionally said in this school. So this is a quote from Jean-Jacques Rousseau: "Give your scholar no verbal lessons. He should be taught by experience alone." Fact learning simply renders pupils passive and they learn nothing. Yeah? Fact learning is a form of cultural imperialism. I choose the facts and I impose them on you. What's the point in learning anything anyway? Because we can go away and Google it. And we should teach skills, not facts. So those are all variations on that theme. And you'll sometimes see around schools, I haven't actually seen this posted on the wall in this school, this taxonomy, this way of categorizing learning, which is shown as a pyramid, and it appears to show that the act of simply remembering stuff is right at the bottom, the most basic skill. And where we should all be heading is to the top, where we're actually analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And what that diagram does, if it's used incorrectly, is it encourages teachers to try and leap to this stuff, the apex of the pyramid, and neglect this stuff because the pyramid appears to show that it's unimportant. So you'll sometimes see these things at the top labeled as high-order thinking skills, and the things at the bottom labeled as low-order thinking skills, like that. And exam questions often reflect this kind of thing. So this is taken from a history paper a couple of years ago. You can see that it pretty much follows that hierarchy. This is simply recounting facts, and it comes with low marks. This is making judgments and evaluating and analyzing, and it comes with higher marks. But here's the thing. You cannot do this unless you also know the facts. Yeah? So Stalin's failure to abide by the agreements made at Yalta and Potsdam caused the Cold War. If I, as a teacher, presented that to you and said, come on, leap to the top of the pyramid, evaluate, synthesize, analyze, you simply cannot do it. Yeah? You can't do those things unless you have the facts. So this Bloom's taxonomy is really quite misleading. And in actual fact, in fairness to Bloom, he never intended it to be used like that. It's better seen as knowledge and comprehension being the foundation on which everything else hangs. Not that these are in some way inferior. Yeah? In fact, to leap to the top of the pyramid, you need an awful lot of knowledge and comprehension, those things at the bottom. Otherwise, you simply can't get to the higher levels. Yeah? Knowledge, evaluation, synthesis, analysis doesn't exist in a vacuum on its own. You can only do those things if you have the things in place at the bottom. So a little quote here, which I won't read out in full, but you see that the very processes that teachers care about most, critical thinking processes such as reasoning and problem solving, are intimately entwined with factual knowledge that's in the long-term memory. And that's an important point as well. People's brains very, very quickly get overloaded. We've got Jonty here, who's a math teacher, and I could start reeling off some mental arithmetic, but it wouldn't be hard for me to start reeling off sums that even he started struggling with if I overloaded his short-term memory. Yeah? I don't know whether anyone came to my presentation last year where I got Mick Farley to remember an 11-digit number. Did anyone come to that? Yeah? So I did an experiment. It was a phone number. I showed it to the audience, and I showed it to Mick. Mick went out and learnt it, and he came back and recited it seamlessly, yeah, in front of the audience within about 60 seconds. And he did that because I gave him a technique that used things that were already in his long-term memory. Yeah? In actual fact, the phone number was made up of famous British dates. So it wouldn't have worked with a Thai person, because those aren't in your long-term memory. But I could have done it with Thai dates. So there are things that Thai people just know. Everyone does. It's part of the cultural knowledge. So Mick went out. It was a 10 or 11-digit number. I can't remember. And I told him the first number is the Battle of Hastings. The next number is the Fire of London, etc., etc. And he came back in and he recited it perfectly. So there's an important point there. That knowledge, which was stored in his long-term memory, helped him with learning that figure. So really what we're doing is trying to get people to get knowledge into their long-term memories so that when it comes to difficult analytical tasks or tasks to do with maths or whatever it is, they can quickly access that stuff and it doesn't have to clog up their short-term memory. And they then get much, much better at those skills at the top of the Bloom's taxonomy. So this is a kind of a reworking of Bloom's taxonomy. There it is, and it only works if you use retrieval practice, constantly checking that you do know this stuff, and filling yourself up with knowledge. It's only by doing those things that you get much, much better at the things at the top of the pyramid. Making the same point here, really, that in order to really know stuff, we need our prior knowledge. Without prior knowledge, we're simply not going to be able to digest new content. So let's not underplay the importance of learning facts. Okay, that was myth number one. Myth number two is that teacher-led instruction is bad. Okay? You sometimes hear that kind of thing referred to as chalk and talk, or the sage on the stage, yeah? A bit like I'm doing now. And this kind of thing as more interactive. The guide on the side, the teacher is simply going around and helping the children find out learning for themselves. And in the UK at least, this is always pushed as the very apogee of a good lesson. Yeah? The children should be doing something, and you should be standing to the side and letting them get on with things. Yeah? Now, I'm absolutely not saying, don't get me wrong, that all lessons should simply be the teacher standing at the board and giving children facts. But certainly in the UK, this message is communicated so strongly that some teachers are embarrassed, even for a few minutes, to stand at the board and explain a task. They want them to straight away leap to this. Yeah? And this is kind of connected to my earlier point. These children don't know anything. Yeah? So if you get them to work together to find out the causes of the Second World War, they don't know anything. They're going to come up with stupid, spurious answers that aren't the truth. They've got to have a foundation of knowledge first. So I think we need a real rebalancing of this. This should not be painted as a wrong way of teaching. In fact, direct instruction, explaining things to people, modeling them in front of them is the most effective way of communicating new knowledge. Not saying, off you go children, go and find out yourselves. They don't even know what to look for. Yeah? They don't even know what to look for. Here's an example. So there are a few things I accept where children don't need any help. Linguistic acquisition. A child below the ages of 2 will, without any direct instruction from you, simply learn how to speak. A child below the ages of 2, without any direct instruction from you, will learn how to walk. Yeah? But if you withhold your child from school and expect them to naturally learn this, it's not going to happen, okay? These are very, very abstract things that civilization has put together. They're in fact entirely human constructs. It doesn't matter how long you leave a baby exposed to this kind of thing, they're not going to understand it unless they're formally and directly taught by a teacher guiding them, giving them direct instruction. So since I've come to Thailand, I've got a real sense of what it must be like to be illiterate. I don't actually know what this says. Yeah? I have not a clue. No matter how long I stare at it, I won't be able to ever read that unless someone formally teaches me to read Thai. Yeah? Sometimes people say, oh yeah, but at some point someone must have stumbled across knowledge naturally. And that is true. Yeah? But if we think about Archimedes discovering the principle of displacement of water, he was a genius. And there had been untold centuries of people before him who hadn't put 2 and 2 together and realized that that was what happened. And the same with Newton, the famous fable of an apple falling on his head. Yeah? That's luck. The right genius in the right place at the right time, who also actually had the ability to document it and then pass it around the world. There may have been people who put 2 and 2 together before Newton, but who never wrote it down, or it never got communicated around the world. You can't rely on these chance happenings to move people forward in their learning. Yeah? Sometimes you see this kind of thing in a classroom, which appears to back it up, to say that actually the very worst way of learning is to be taught, yeah? And the very best way of learning is to... the very best way of learning is to teach others, and the very worst way of learning is to simply be lectured at. Yeah? And you'll notice that these are given very, very even percentages. Now, when you see a graph like that, that should immediately set alarm bells ringing. Are you seriously telling me, yeah, that in a lecture, always less than 10% of what is spoken is remembered? And that when you read, exactly between 10 and 20% of what you read is remembered? Yeah? These are just arbitrary divisions made up to make the diagram look nice. Yeah? They have no basis in fact or science or research. Yeah? It somehow seems like it might be true to us, but it's not. Yeah? Some lectures are enormously effective, and sometimes teaching others is utterly useless. If I try and teach John T. calculus, it will be totally useless for me and for him. Yeah? So just be careful when you see these kind of things. They're snake oil. That is not the truth. The last thing I want to talk about is my own experience. If you try and learn something yourself on the internet, as I have been trying to do with computer programming, it's enormously time-consuming and ineffective. And you sometimes learn things that are totally wrong, and then keep repeating them and keep repeating them and keep repeating them. This is a script I've written for the boarding houses that reminds teachers that they're on duty. Yeah? And I did this research online, cutting other people's bits of code, doctoring it a bit myself. It took me hours and hours and hours. Yeah? If I showed this to Mr. Murphy, he could have done it in seconds. And better than that, he could have said, oh, you don't need that line, you can put those 2 lines together and so on. So formal instruction is extremely important, really, really important for accelerating kids' learning, yeah, and making sure that they really get the handle on things. Some nice little summary diagrams of this. We know decades of research tell us unambiguously that direct, explicit instruction for novices, by which we mean students, is more effective and efficient than minimal guidance methods. And that's because students and experts are actually wired differently. Yeah? Students have no access to other related information on which they can hang the parcels of information that they're finding out about. Yeah? They don't know what the context is, whereas experts already possess multiple pieces of knowledge which they can hang the new knowledge on. Yeah? Students try to remember and process individual aspects of a skill, whereas experts can do it effortlessly. Yeah? Students who are learning spend an awful lot of time simply trying to solve the problem, rather than actually learning what's at hand. Yeah? Sometimes find this in lessons. If you ask people to go away and research on the internet, you find that they're not finding out anything about what you wanted them to find out about. They're looking up words that they don't know the meaning of, because they don't have the linguistic ability to even grapple with the material that they're finding themselves. And more differences between students and experts. Because of this, if you go to a school where they say direct instruction is bad, kids should be active in the classroom and they should be learning things themselves, the achievement gap widens and widens and widens. I've seen this happen loads with project work. So if you give a class of students project work and say, off you go, research that, yeah? All that happens is the children from middle-class households with lots of books get help from their parents, and they already have lots of knowledge, and they do fantastically well. The children whose parents are busy working in a low-paid job in the evenings when they get back, and don't have any books, fall behind and behind and behind and behind. So let's not mess around. Let's be honest. Let's teach facts and knowledge. Let's not be afraid to teach from the front and indulge in direct instruction. And that's not to say that every lesson should be boring, because there are different ways of doing this. One is a lecture. I wouldn't have year sixes sitting like you listening to me for a whole hour. Clearly that would be stupid. But there are other ways of doing it. What I would do is make sure that my lesson used my expertise to impart knowledge to them and didn't expect them to find it all out on their own, because that's an extremely ineffective way of teaching. Okay, so my third myth is that we should teach transferable skills. So you sometimes see in schools, we're going to do away with subjects and we're going to teach them to think critically. We're going to teach them to scan texts. We're going to teach them to problem solve. Yeah? So here's a little example. If I taught you in the abstract how to scan texts, and I said you should skip and look at every word, every other word, or you should skip lines, or you should look for keywords in the text, a lot of you in this audience are still going to find this extraordinarily hard, because you may not know what etymology means. So immediately that's a block. Yeah? It'd be far more efficient if I gave you knowledge, yeah, in context to allow you to do this task, and didn't waste time pretending that these skills can be taught in the abstract. Yeah? Here's an experiment that has been done to prove this fact is true. So grandmasters at chess and people like me at chess were shown a chessboard with chess pieces in actual positions of play, and they were asked to memorize where those positions were. I think they were given about 2 minutes to do that. Okay? And surprise, surprise, the grandmasters could remember between 90 to 100% of the actual positions of the chess pieces, and people like me could remember perhaps where one pawn was. Yeah? When those chess pieces were just put in random positions and the same experiment was run, the grandmasters were no better than people like you or me. Yeah? So that tells us something really significant about grandmasters. Often we hear, oh, they're very, very powerful abstract reasoners. They've got huge skills in analyzing that would be applicable to other fields. No, they haven't. No, they haven't. They have remembered and internalized thousands upon thousands of actual chess positions. And it's that that gives them the advantage. When you muddle the chess pieces up into positions that can never happen in normal play, they're no better than a normal person in remembering them. Yeah? And neither are they any better at reasoning in other contexts. So those abstract skills, reasoning, problem solving, and so on, are intimately entwined with domain-specific knowledge. Yeah? Some of you here will be engineers, some of you will be lawyers, some of you will be property developers. The reason you're very good at those things is because you know a lot about that field. You have a lot of knowledge about that field. If I plucked a lawyer out and put him in front of a class of Year 6 students, yeah, I've seen this happen, it doesn't work. Yeah? The lawyer's a genius. You should see him in court. Yeah? But unfortunately, those skills are very specific to that particular field, and they don't work in other fields. So we shouldn't try and teach generic transferable skills. We should be shameless about teaching our subjects and our knowledge in our field. Yeah? And children will get better at reasoning as a result of doing that. Nearly on my last myth now. The next myth you hear quite a lot, and I understand, and I feel almost embarrassed in raising this, because I myself am a white, male, relatively wealthy, heterosexual. Of course I would say this. Yeah? Of course I would say this. But some people say that this more doctrinaire style of teaching, giving people facts, directly instructing them, is actually just a form of cultural imperialism. Yeah? All I'm doing is imposing my views on you. Yeah? And of course it's particularly sensitive in a school like this. A lot of the teachers have come from the UK. What right have we to subvert Thai knowledge and Thai culture to our own culture? None at all. None at all. So I understand that there are sensitivities. But, there's a canon of world knowledge which does include a lot of dead white men. Your children, even if they remain in Thailand, will inevitably come across lots and lots of dead white men. Yeah? That's the way things are. They may react strongly against it, but they can only react strongly against it if they know those things in the first place. Otherwise, they don't know what they're complaining about. Yeah? So I get quite annoyed sometimes when I hear in the UK, oh yes, that's privileged knowledge. Why are you foisting that on someone who's seen as lower class to you? They should be celebrating their own culture. Yeah? That's high culture in some way. Who are you ex-Harrovian, to talk to them about what they should know? I'm just going to show you this. Okay? There is no such thing as high culture. There are facts, there are truths, there are things to find out. No one owns that knowledge. Yeah? Certainly not rich people. They don't own knowledge. Yeah? Knowledge is free and available for everyone. This is one of the exciting things about the internet. It's democratizing who can get this knowledge. Just look at these two examples, okay? Who would you rather be taught history by? Jonty. The point is that Melvin Bragg he runs this program which you may have heard on Radio 4 called In Our Time, Culture. He's an enormously cultured and knowledgeable person. He was born in Wigan, which is a poor town in the north of England, so all the disadvantages you can pretty much have in the UK. He went to a state school. He's not traditionally part of the privileged elite. Yeah? But you can be damn sure that I would rather be taught history by him than these two. Yeah? They don't own high culture. It's not theirs. There's nothing special about it. They don't know huge amounts of knowledge. Yeah? This isn't to do with wealth and power. It's to do with truth. So I roundly reject this notion that the teaching of facts is somehow bad. It may well be that once you know those facts, you make a decision that there should be additional facts or alternative points of view. But you've got to know the facts in the first place in order to come to that position. And my final myth is this, which is really this question asked to teachers, that individuals learn better when they receive information in their preferred learning style, as opposed to not. Yeah? And often you'll hear the learning styles phrased like this: some people learn visually by looking at things, some people learn by hearing things, and some people learn by doing things kinesthetically. Yeah? There are even more. In fact, 70 learning styles have been identified. Yeah? So if this was true, it couldn't possibly be put into practice in any normal lesson, because you'd be having to chop and change different styles of teaching almost continually in order to accommodate the needs of the students in front of you. So that's the first thing. Just the sheer practicality of doing this doesn't add up. So this is the theory, that some people learn by hearing, some people learn by seeing, some people learn by doing. Yeah? So this has been put to the test. Yeah? And here's the experiment that was done. People who claimed to learn in an auditory fashion, who claimed to learn in a visual fashion, who claimed to learn in a kinesthetic fashion, were given two lists to learn. Yeah? One of the lists was spoken out by speakers. So that should favor the auditory learner. Yeah? They learn by hearing, so speaking the words should favor them. And the other of the lists was presented visually on a screen, so that should favor the visual learner. Yeah? And it turns out when they were tested on the lists that there was no difference between either of the learning types, the listening or the visual. Yeah? And that's because if I say the word "force it" to you, yeah, even if you're a visual learner, it actually means something to you. It has meaning. Yeah? So it's really the meaning behind these words, not how they're delivered, that helps you remember them. If you don't know the word "force it," it will be harder for you to remember. If you don't know what it is, yeah, it will be harder to remember. If we take this to the logical extreme, it should be the case, if people genuinely learn better by hearing, that if I say to you the shape of the border of Chad, it should be easier for you to remember it than if I show it to you. But I don't think anyone would say that was the case. Yeah? Everyone, whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, needs to see the shape of Chad in order to picture it in their minds and be able to recall it at a later date. Take another example. Speaking French fluently with a French accent. Yeah? If I show it to you on a screen, it's no blind bit of good, even if you say you are a visual learner. You need to hear it. Yeah? If you act it out, it doesn't help. You need to hear it. So holes are starting to emerge in this theory that people should always be presented with information in their chosen learning style. Yeah? Different types of knowledge require different types of delivery, regardless of what you say is your preference. Yeah? This is a quote that I really like. The idea that the best way for a so-called auditory learner to learn a shape is to describe it to them instead of showing them a picture, or that a visual learner will best learn to serve a tennis ball by watching the movement instead of practicing it is clearly nonsense. Yeah? I'm just going to round up by showing you Daniel Willingham sum that up. He does it better than I can. Sum up those points that I've made about those different types of learning.
It's true that some people have a better visual memory than other people, and other people are better at learning auditory material than other people are. But that fact isn't really all that important for teachers, because most of what teachers want students to learn is not particularly visual or auditory or kinesthetic. Most of what teachers want students to learn is based on meaning. The second point concerns the particular prediction of the theory. The important prediction of the theory is not that some people have better visual memory than other people. The prediction is that those people with a good visual memory will always learn better if you present things visually. But that idea is clearly wrong. When you've got something that you want students to learn that's especially visual, like the shape of a country on a map, everybody needs to see a visual presentation, not just those people who have really good visual memory. Okay, so if the theory is wrong, as I'm claiming, Why does it seem so right?
One reason is that everyone believes it, not just teachers. The theory is accepted by about 90% of the students at the University of Virginia. Second reason people believe it is that something close to the theory is right. People can learn in different ways, and some people are especially good at learning certain types of information. But the specific predictions of the theory and the way that you would apply it in the classroom are wrong. A third reason this theory seems right is that if you already believe it, you'll probably interpret ambiguous situations as consistent with the theory. For example, suppose you're talking to a student about the structure of the atom, but it's not really clicking. Finally, you say, picture the solar system. The nucleus of an atom is like the sun, and the electrons are like the planets spinning around it. The student understands, and you think, aha, he must be a visual learner. But maybe that was just a good analogy that would have helped any student. Or maybe the student needed just one more example for the idea to click. Why the student understood at that point is actually ambiguous. But if you already believe the theory, you're likely to interpret what happened as being consistent with the theory. Remember, there are many theories about learning styles. Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic is just one. But what I've said about that theory goes for the others too.
Good teaching is good teaching, and teachers don't need to adjust their teaching to individual students' learning styles.